because from my perspective, the loudest voices are the extremists. And they are the ones who seem to be, perhaps they are the tail wagging the dog, because we're not hearing a lot of these moderate voices. Now, I'll refer to in France, for example, they decided that they would have a joint Muslim and Jewish rally for peace. This was after October 7th. And the Muslim man who was the organizer was the only Muslim there. It was all Jewish people. And he was frustrated and he was lamenting and he was angry that more Muslims didn't come out, that it was only him. And I said, well, you have to know that there are probably a lot of other Muslims who agree with you and who would want to stand there with you, but they would be afraid to do that. Because within the mainstream, the powerful, the noisy, the angry, the scary, the ones that you were referring to yourself, the fact that you wouldn't, admonish LGBT people, they came after you for that, that mob of people with their pitchforks, they are always the loudest and they overpower the voices of the moderate. So how do we deal with this?
I'll give you an example. If you're driving down the highway and you see a beautiful sunset, no one's going to stop and talk about it. But then you see an accident, you're going to talk about it. Be like, oh my God, there's an accident. That's how this whole market, that's how the world works. That if you have someone who says have peace, perfect. No one's going to talk about that or care about that, even though it's there. When you have someone that's going to come out and say, oh, go and kill or go and oppose, or we need to, especially with the war happening right now, where the war happening right now, Israel Palestine, where the voice that's going to come out, that's going to be a little bit more militant. That's what's going to gain popularity. Again, that's just the nature of how humans probably perceive it. Because when no one's going to talk about the beautiful sunset or the nice mountains, they're going to talk about the accident or the 10-car pileup, because that's something that's confrontation or something that happens. So like I know for a fact that if any one of you were to go to a mosque and ask people like, are we supposed to be militant against, depending on which mosque you go to, the majority of the mosques they'll say no, but superiority complex, I can clarify that that's always going to be there because we are the best, we have the truth, etc. That's to be the narrative there. But as for killing and opposing, only in particular very Islamist extremist mosques, they would be there. That voice would be there. And those are probably the voices that CSIS or the FBI is probably monitoring anyways.
Yes,
Which
and
is
what's
not,
unfortunate is they're the loudest voices, Othman. That's what I'm trying to get
they
across to you,
are.
which I'm sure you're
Absolutely.
already aware of, that they are, when people think of Muslims, those are the first people they think of, because they're the
Oh,
ones that are
absolutely.
dominating the conversation and they're the ones that are putting themselves front and center and speaking up for the Muslim community, even if they haven't been voted, or appointed, but they put themselves in that
Absolutely.
position and they make themselves look like this is what Muslim people believe. Intifada and all the other stuff that they're yelling out.
Oh, absolutely. That is the more prominent narrative. Clearly, that is. I mean, I can give you a crazy story, and this is recorded, so I don't even mind. We're growing up in boarding school. The supervisor of our school, he called a bunch of students, and he's like, if you really want to bomb America or bomb this place or whatever, you go or this spot over here by Pearson Airport, and that's where all the airplanes are lined up, and you just throw a bomb like straight that way. We're just 12, 13-year-old kids, right? So yes, that conversation does happen in certain areas, and maybe it's there. I can only comment on what's out in the open. And yes, these voices that are there, they're out in the open and they're really, really loud and they dictate the conversation and they dictate the mindset that people will think about Muslims. But then at the same time, I call myself Muslim and I have a lot of friends who are Muslims as well. You may have a lot of friends who are Muslim who completely don't, they're like, yeah, no, Sorry, we
Yes,
don't do
but
that.
my friends that are Muslim are similar to you in that they have to be very quiet about their beliefs because they're also constantly getting criticisms, attacks, death threats,
Yep.
etc. So yes, those Muslims exist, but they're certainly not the ones that are leading the conversation by any
Yep.
means.
Yeah, the conversation is led by the militants or the ones who have the louder voice or the ones who have the controversy. So
And I guess that's where that's my question now is how can we reverse that? Because if they are supposedly the majority, then how can we hear their voices instead of hearing the voices of the supposed minority of extremists?
that's it's a hard question to answer, as you know,
Yeah.
because we're looking at marketing these voices. Well, you've been yourself. You have a label connected to you as atheist or bad or whatever. So any conversation that comes from you, like these are those voices that are going to label everyone, right?
Mhm.
And if they're going to start labeling everyone and they're the ones running the narrative, there's no way that our voices are going to become loud enough, especially if society needs someone to hate. And then by default, we become that person who gets that, who gets the blame just for our skin color or our names, right? That's a really really hard question to answer. I don't know. I
Mhm.
don't know the answer to that. That maybe
I think that
maybe
the
our
that
voice is
that's a
louder. I don't know.
And it will continue to be a difficult question because I feel that those who are the extremists always look like the more authentic Muslims because they're the ones who are in hijab or the beards or
Yeah,
quoting Quran or quoting a hadith. Whereas the other ones who are, they're more like, let's have a woman be an imam or let's have gay people come to our mosque. And so they're considered, oh, you're not an authentic Muslim, right? And so the other ones are always given a lot more credibility. And that I think is the crux of the problem with reforming Islam. Reforming Muslims, no problem. I think Muslims reform themselves and each other every day, all day, and that's wonderful to
yeah.
see. But as far as reforming the religion itself, I think that's going to be pretty difficult. And I'm going to read you a question from Aaliyah.